Hi, welcome. My name is Jill Jonathan, and I'm with Red, Wine, and Blue. And in honor of Banned Books Week, we have another exciting conversation with another incredible author. So today we'll be talking to Elana K. Arnold, and Joe Carducci will be joining as well. Cannot wait for this conversation. I would say that writers are some of my favorite people. They're observers of the world, and we can all learn so much from them. So looking forward to this conversation, and as soon as Joe and Elana are here, I'll go ahead and add them. Thank you everybody for joining. And also, just a little bit about Red, Wine, and Blue. We're a community of women who use digital media and friend-to-friend organizing to change the world one suburb at a time. And one way we do this and we love to see your comments. So if you have any comments during the discussion, please share. We read those. It's a little hard to get through all of them, but we definitely read them. So yay, there's Joe, there's Elana. Hello. How are you ladies?
Hello, I'm so glad to be here.
Hi, good to see you again.
Thank you for having me again.
So after our last conversation, I bought your book, Damsel, and my 14-year-old daughter read it and she loved it. And
Good.
She was like coveting the cover. It's so beautiful.
It is
so
a gorgeous cover. Yeah.
She was
Gray has done well by me always.
Oh my gosh. So she held on to it for a while and I'm like, I'd like to read that too. And she's like, yeah, but it's staying on my bookshelf because it's so beautiful.
Okay. Yay. We'll tell her I say hello and thank you for reading.
I will. So thank you for joining us once again. It's Banned Books Week, so a lot of people are talking about it, and I don't know, just curious, what are your thoughts about this week? And since we last talked a couple of months ago, do you think things are getting worse, better, the same? What are your thoughts of the status right now?
Yeah, yesterday I went to a local public high school here in Long Beach called Poly High School. I was invited by the librarian, and it was a lunchtime meeting. Students had to sign up in advance and show up at the during their lunch. So I was like, well, maybe we'll get 15 students that show up. There were 135 students that came voluntarily on their lunch to hear me talk about banned books. So I think that the word has spread to, the youth that their rights are being taken from them, and that other people are speaking for them and over them. So I found that to be really encouraging. How many young people chose to show up on their lunch. So, I continue to get terrible emails from people who call themselves concerned parents, but are actually, I think, fear mongers and people who want to control and shut down conversation and deny young people access to books. So that's no good. Yes. I have also gotten a lot of requests from news organizations to speak, the last couple of weeks, which is great. I hope it translates into people showing up into their actual local school boards and local elections, because it's really to do the most good. I know everybody wants to, wear the T-shirt, and I love the T-shirt that I wear banned books. I read banned books T-shirts. I have one. But we have to buy the books and we have to show up at the meetings too. So yeah, it's a three-pronged plan.
Yeah.
T-shirt, just one prong.
I'm curious about that luncheon because we know that this has never been youth driven. Yeah. It's never been driven by the kids, right? It's like, as you said, it's the fear mongers making decisions for them. And the youth that today are much more in tune. They're much more aware. That people want to dismiss that. But I'm so curious as to, what their feedback was, or, the things that they were saying, or what you're hearing from them. Like, that's what I'm so curious about.
It's so interesting looking out at the crowd of people at my local public high school, because, the identities that are most frequently banned, the books off, it's about identities. It's about trying to ban people. I mean, the books are a medium. They're a device, but it's not really about the books. No one's read most of the books that are out there banning them. They're banning conversation. They're trying to shut down identities. And so looking out at this crowd of people, it was full of, Black students of color, lots of, visibly queer students. There were some, gender fluid appearing students. There were a lot of female identifying students, and they were very engaged with what I was talking about. They understood that their right to be who they are in the world is ultimately a bigger, even more vital question than individual books on the shelves. And they understand the connection between silencing books and silencing them. A lot of them stayed after to tell me that they're grateful that I was there and to, tell me how angry they were. So yeah, it was a really positive event, even though it was about a really negative topic.
I mean, just saying that, and I appreciate the way you said that, it's not about banning books, it's about banning identities. And I think if we can all understand that, then we all need to be enraged by this. We need to be upset by it. I don't know if everybody fully understands the scope of what this means for the people in our society. So would you be able to expand on that?
I can try. Yeah. I mean, it's really, I think this is an attack on public education.
Yes.
It is meant to undermine the authority and the deeply researched collections created by trained librarians. It is meant to sort of brick by brick take apart a public institution, public schooling. And not only that, it's public schooling, but also public libraries. Like when I spoke up in Huntington Beach a couple of months ago, that was a city council meeting wanting to strip the public librarians, the public city librarians, of their right to build collections. It wanted the city attorney to have ultimate right to look at every book in the collection and decide by himself, his cisgendered, white, heteronormative male self, if a book was pornography and whether it belonged in the collection, which undermines so many of our tenets of how things are supposed to work. It was absolutely mind-boggling, and it passed.
Wow.
I mean, so now it'll go on, and we'll see what happens, and hopefully the ACLU will get involved if it needs to. But so it's about tearing apart institutions, which we're seeing writ large, in the political sphere, but it's happening in your backyards. It's happening at your school board meetings. It's happening when librarians, like the librarian I spoke with yesterday, got a phone call. Are these 10 books in your collection? And when she didn't respond she understood what it was. It was a phishing email from someone who was wanting to, who had gotten probably marching orders from like a group like Moms of Liberty. Call your local school library, even if you don't have a student there, ask about these 10 books, demand that they're taken. She didn't respond. A woman showed up several days later demanding to see the books and to have them removed. They didn't happen to have any of the books in the library at the time, but what a scary thing, and completely inappropriate for this person to barge into, a public school. She made it past security. It's terrifying. So yeah, it's happening. Big picture, we're seeing it on the news. It's happening. Small picture, you might not even notice that it's happening. It's like erosion. You don't notice until the building collapses. But we're here to tell you that it's your rights and your institutions are being eroded from beneath you, and you might not notice until the whole thing topples. But imagine if we tried to open public libraries today. If there were no public libraries, or no public schools, and we said, I have a great idea. Let's open this institution that educates people, or let's open this institution that allows free access to all of these wonderful learning materials and reading materials and pleasure materials. Can you imagine if those things would pass today and be funded today? They wouldn't. There's no way in our divided sort of hate-mongering political sphere that those institutions would be founded. And so I think what people are trying to do is to take them away.
Yeah. To tear them down.
Book by book, they're tearing apart your institutions that educate your children and give you free access to information.
And a lot of people don't know that that's happening. I apologize, I'm losing my voice for some reason. A lot of people don't know that that's happening and think that we're the fear mongers by saying all of this stuff is happening. But it is important. I feel like we're like the Army Corps of Engineers, kind of like, okay, we know what they're doing. We see the bricks they're removing. We are really here to keep putting them back. We're here to keep putting them back. We're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep having these conversations, because what you said is it is part of this systemic wide thing, this agenda, to remove access to information, because information, as we talk about all the time, is our greatest tool. It is the strongest weapon we can have. And you talked earlier about, you know, erasing identities essentially. And they're not just erasing identities, they're erasing history. Which brings me to your book, The Blood Years, which is a story that needs to be told and can never be erased. And I get very emotional talking about this because your personal connection to this story is so important. It's such a valuable bridge to the past, to an accurate past. So you want to talk about the book a little bit, and again about erasing history too?
I would love to. So this is my forthcoming novel. It comes out on Tuesday, the 10th of October. It's called The Blood Years. It is my first work of historical fiction. It is the result of 10 years of writing and 48 years of being a human on this earth, because it is the story of my grandmother's teenage years in Chernovitz, Romania during the Holocaust. It's a story she told to me over and over with more and more detail as I got older and older. And then over the last 10 years, I have turned it into a novel by enriching what I knew from her life with the lives of other Chernovitzers and other Holocaust survivors. Even the dreams in this book are based on real dreams that real Jews were having during the early years of the Holocaust. So they're fictionalized versions, they're mine, but everything in this is deeply researched and deeply true. Even the little parts that I had to make up to sort of connect it together. It includes at the beginning a timeline of how the war progressed in Chernovitz, Romania. It has an author's note and extensive back matter, and I know it is a beautiful, wonderfully crafted story about sisterhood, about family, about ballet. And ultimately, I think this is a book about the great and terrible things people do in the name of love. And it's a book I hope everyone will purchase, and then everyone will purchase again to give to their local school library or their local public library. I hope you'll request it at your local libraries and ask them to add it to their collections. I hope you'll consider sharing it with your reading group, teen, adult alike. It is a young adult novel, as my other novels are, and like my other novels, it's meant to be widely read by anybody who cares about the teenage experience. How was that?
That was perfect. And I am finding that I'm really enjoying reading these books because I have a teenager, and I think it's just like helpful for me as a mom of a teenager. But I'm curious, you said it's been like a 10-year project. When you started this project, did you imagine where we would be? I mean, how could you?
Yeah,
imagine where we would be 10 years from now when, you know, it's ready to be, you know, it's on the market in just a few days.
Yeah, no, actually, when I started this book originally, I thought I was going to set it in a near future world in which the Holocaust came again, where people were like stripping identities again, where people were banning books and burning them again. And then in about 2016, I decided that did not so much sound like an interesting theoretical thought experiment. You know, when I was seeing the rise of anti-Semitic tags in my own neighborhood in Huntington Beach, where I used to live, when I was seeing people storming the Capitol wearing 6 million is not enough sweatshirts.
Yeah.
When I saw, tiki carrying radicals shouting anti-Semitic slurs, all of a sudden it seemed important to me to ground the story in its real history. But it's told in first person present tense, because I think that is sort of a thematic way of underlining the fact that this history isn't gone, and this history isn't just in the past. It's cyclical. Hate against Jews has always been cyclical, and violence against Jews has always been cyclical. And unfortunately, we are in an upcycle of that cyclicality, right along with violence against Black and brown people, violence against trans people, the stripping away of women's rights. All of those things are sort of rising up together right now in a kind of a horrible wave.
There is something so mind-blowing about the fact that you were going to imagine painting this dystopian reality that you didn't, that actually ended up surpassing probably what you could have ever imagined, and no longer needed to paint as a fiction. It's the reality that's on our doorstep. It's not on our doorstep, it's inside the house. And I mean, it's so interesting because there's this timelessness to this story. There's a timelessness to the themes of this story. that, like, about, like you said, using love as a basis for committing, horrible acts and doing horrible things. And it's also about, survival. And it also tells a story as a cautionary tale as well, because this is the reality that, again, it's not just on the doorstep, right? It's we're confronted with it inside the house. And what kind of lessons do you think, a reader, any reader, young reader or adult reader, can take away from the connectedness of the story and the themes that go throughout this story and now today?
Yeah. Another thing I just want to mention real quick is that this story is set in Chernovitz, Romania, and part of the story is the Russians invading and taking over. And the city in which this story is set, Chernovitz, Romania, is now Ukraine. And as I was working on this book in 2020, another sort of cycle that repeated itself was the Russian invasion of this exact city. So it's like nothing is, everything old is new again. Sort of the cyclicality sort of speaks to, you get to a certain age, you start to see things come back around, like fashion, on a fun level. But you see other more horrible things come back around as well. Well, when I work as a writer, I think my job is to do my very best to tell the truth of the world as I see it through the lens of my lived experience, my research, and the things that fascinate, terrify, titillate, and compel me. I never think about lessons. I know that right now it's kind of, sometimes we really want our young readers to get a lesson from a book. And I think that's one of the things that sort of people on the other side are saying, this isn't literature, this shouldn't be in our library because it doesn't teach good lessons. And once we start talking about what a good lesson is, and which books may or may not have them, I think we maybe are playing into the hand of those who seek to eliminate a lot of voices. I actually am more interested in raising questions and exploring sort of the beautiful, terrible reality of being a human. I am sure that readers will come away from my book transformed. I did. But I'd love to hear from them what they learned or saw or fought against or hated in the pages of the book. But yeah, I do think this is a book, for me, one of the things I've wrestled with, one of the questions that I wrestled with thematically is, what is love? Because sometimes people think one thing is love and they do terrible things. And sometimes those terrible people can also do great things, which historically was true for my grandmother. And so I think looking at the complex reality of history and also the complex reality of love and of being a human is what is at sort of the core of this work. And a Jew as well, the complexity of being a Jewish person then and for me now has definitely informed this book as well. And a woman. I mean, the blood years, the name the blood years itself, comes from, of course, not all women have a period. Trans women are women, 100%. But this book focuses on the experience of a cisgendered girl coming of age and entering womanhood during World War II.
And I wanted to just real quick, just pick up on that because I was curious because there is sexual assault in the book, and it's obviously, I guess I just talk about that because I have this suspicion, knowing how they go, that will be something that the Moms for Liberty groups will say, identify as a reason to ban this book. But I want to talk about why you included it, why it was important to include it, what just talk about that.
Yeah, so you're right, because several of my other books, one of the things that they have been banned for is including scenes of sexual assault, which they sort of lump under an umbrella of pornography, which is disturbing in lots of ways. Another thing my books have been banned for is anti-Christian rhetoric, which I think is super interesting.
Wow.
I certainly am interested in pushing into systems, and religion is a system, and that is something that occurs in my books. I had to include sexual assault in this book. I mean, first of all, it was the Holocaust. Women were being raped and murdered right and left. It's, all people were all Jewish people were at risk of systemic erasure, of death, of rape. Rape is one way to dehuman a person. And I had to include sexual assault because my grandmother was a survivor of sexual assault. The story that she told me about being raped, well, how could I not put it in the book? It's the truth. So it was never a question of if it was going to be included. I never think about what are people going to say, or could this get my book banned? What a scary, slippery slope that is. Because
Right.
again, they're not banning the books because of a word, because I said the F word. They're banning the books because they want to erase experience and keep people ignorant. I have a picture book called What Riley Wore. It's a gentle, sweet, kind, fun picture book about a kid named Riley who wears whatever the occasion calls for. If Riley is scared, Riley wears a bunny costume. If Riley is going to a fancy restaurant, Riley wears a ball gown. And the book is written with no pronouns. It's just doesn't matter. Riley just is expressing emotion through clothing choice. And that book gets banned. So, artists and writers cannot limit their choices based on what they think they can get away with or what they think they might be able to get. You're getting in bed with the censors if you start self-censoring.
Absolutely. And don't you think that's part of the point too, and we've talked about this a lot, is that fear.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a writer and you're writing with fear of what's going to happen to this book, or a librarian, who's fearful of what's going to happen to your job or these things, it's like, that scares me so much, is that fear of keeping people from doing their jobs and what they're trained to do.
I feel so terrible for the librarians and the teachers who are out there having to defend with their body sometimes their students' rights to have access to these books, who are being threatened, doxxed, followed home. It's not fair. That's not what they signed on for. I don't even know how to begin addressing that issue. As a writer, I can tell you there's plenty of fear in the room with me when I write. Is this good? Am I good? Am I good enough? Did I do a good enough job? Am I worthy? I don't need other fear voices in my head. I've got enough already. It's enough. It's already a full-time job trying to tell those voices that they should be quiet while I'm working. And I'll ask them to join when I need my character to experience some of those emotions. But for now, just shh. So yes, we cannot allow other, I like to do this. I tell myself blinders on. I'm like a horse leading a carriage. And my entire job, horses wear those blinders for a reason, is to see the work right in front of me and not allow any of this other stuff to take up space, because this is my job. So I literally do this. I have my students do this, and to protect just the page right in front of them, just one word at a time.
Yeah, and that's why personally, I think that the fact that you didn't think about that, didn't include those considerations in your mind, that you just told the story the way you wanted to tell the story, and this was never a consideration. And the fact that there's this sort of a sustained attack on removing stories like that from being accessed by our youth, it's incredible. And I'm so impressed by authors like you who do just what you're doing and just commit to the work and telling the stories the way you want to tell them. And I mean, it's so important that that's in a novel like yours, because it could save lives. Books can save lives, and someone may see themselves in that story. They may have never spoken up about it, and that it's there, that it's something someone else can either see others through, or see themselves in. That there's an attack on trying to take something out of that under the guise of pornography is the kind of thing that makes these conversations, to me, so incredibly worthwhile. Because we talked to Ellen O yesterday. She talks about banned books saving lives. Books save lives, and your book could save lives, and they want to maybe take that away from our youth having access to, is very disturbing to me.
And I think honestly, a lot of these people don't value those lives.
Right.
Honestly, I mean, you see that terrible Moms for Liberty, her bear cubs are okay sort of situation. You see that illustration of like a mother bear. This is Moms for Liberty, and her little cubs are right by her, all safe. And if you zoom out on the picture, there's like the bodies of, Black and brown and queer people, and women, like sort of spread around, like her cubs are fine, but who cares about the rest? Is this sort of very scary, divisive, ancient hate that those that are in matter and those that are on the periphery, right now, including Jewish people, who it's okay. You know, their bodies are not worth saving. Their bodies are expendable. In fact, maybe they're not even people. And that's what happened to my grandmother and her people, is that they were no longer people. They were no longer, you know, their citizenship was taken away. Their right to have a business was taken away. Their right to own property was taken away. Their right to live was taken away. And the fact that any of them made it through is honestly testament, I believe, more than anything, to luck. You know, it's not that my family was the smartest or the bravest, or the most talented or the most worthy or the most deserving. Just some people lived. And I'm so grateful that my grandmother did and was able to rebuild her life and give me mine.
And now you're carrying on that story, which is so incredible. I think taking that, and I just wanted to talk about just a little bit about, you know, public education and, you know, removing books and challenging books from kids. Another thing that's being challenged is social emotional learning. And and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because if you have those social emotional learning skills, and respect, diversity, equity, and inclusion, then it's harder to dehumanize others. So I feel like, and that's what Ellen O was saying, like some people are like, oh, book bans, there's so many other things to worry about. She's like, it's all related.
Yeah, it is.
It is all related. And I'm just curious if you have anything. I mean, you've been talking about it already, but just like how this is all related. We're not just talking about this specific like books being challenged. We're talking about the whole thing and how this affects us as a society.
Yeah, no, it is. It is all related. The books are the, you know, maybe the canary in the coal mine, you know, they're the thing that's easier to go after. They're small, they're fragile. They, especially books, you know, for and about children or teens, are often considered to be not as, you know, they're not the classics. They're not the, you know, they're not the canon. They're sort of easier, especially newly published things and things published by creators that are not traditionally seen as the writers of the canon, you know, people of color, queer people, women. These books are kind of easier to take away because people might say, well, they're not real literature anyway. And so they don't get people to stand up and fight for them, even in the same way as if you see someone taking, you know, they're taking Catcher in the Rye from our library. How dare they? People show up.
Yeah.
Catcher of the Rye becomes a bestseller, you know. Well, great. I'm glad for Catcher in the Rye. You know, I think it's a good book and it should be in the library. Even if I didn't think it was a good book, I think it's, you know, if a librarian collected it and put it in her collection, then there it should remain until the librarian determines that it's no longer serving her community because it hasn't been checked out in 3 years and she weeds it. That is a natural life cycle of a library book. We have to decide, do we trust librarians to do their job?
Yeah.
And if we do, then we have to defend them so that they can do their job. They are trained people with master's degrees and who continue their education and go to conferences and talk to each other and subscribe to publications and do continual work to build collections, both to have their community see themselves in the books and to widen the perspective of what their community can see beyond what they might see in their classroom or in their city. And these other people are not that. They are fear mongers with a list of targets that they're sort of told to go after. But it is, like I say in the author's note at the end of the book, it is so much easier to create than destroy. It can take a whole group of kids a whole afternoon to build a sandcastle. And all it takes is one bully to come up and give it one good kick and it falls down. And so not only do we need to be the artists who create the work, we need to be the people who defend it and keep it from, you know, from collapsing.
And I think that's where we can come in, you know, and why part of that is having
right now
conversations like this is defending it and the work that we do at Red, Wine, and Blue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so important that there are groups like yours helping other, you know, people have information about what's happening and then hopefully encouraging them to do something with it. You know, signing things online is great. Buying the t-shirt is great, but unfortunately, you have to show up at those terrible, boring, awful meetings. You have to vote in the smallest, most local elections and care who's going to be on the school board. You have to be part of the parent teacher student association if you have a kid in the school. You have to ask your librarian librarian, how are things going? Is this hitting you at home? Is there anything you need from us as a community? Because those are the things that that can't be done online.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Joe, did you have something? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, not at all. No, I was just thinking about the sandcastle and like us all standing around the sandcastle
Yeah.
with our arms linked together. I was just like the imagery of that. But and I don't think a librarian ever signed up to be on the front lines of this battle. You know, it's like
none of us did. But
right.
you know what? Most times when there is a war, people, they have to step up. They didn't choose to necessarily. You know, they weren't already enlisted as officers. Unfortunately, you know, look at the Ukrainians and how many civilians are stepping up now because they have to.
Which is another, and I forgot, but also like to think that that town is now on the precipice of facing the same exact reality that your grandmother knew. I mean, really, this idea of things coming around and what maybe we've learned from the things in the past. Hopefully, you know, it's crazy that that's the same town is faced with the same fate.
Yeah, it is very strange.
I was just thinking, you know, before we close, like I truly believe in the power of story, and you know, I think that's what you do with your work. And like you're saying, you're not writing something to be like, what lessons is somebody going to take away from this? Because I think just telling a story is how you can learn about things. And so seeing that being threatened is terrifying, and we all need to defend that. So
I agree. Humans are natural storytellers. Each of you is a storyteller. Each of your children is a storyteller. Do you want someone putting their hand over your kid's mouth?
That's right.
That happens too. Students aren't allowed to talk about certain subjects anymore. They're not supposed to ask questions about certain subjects anymore. And that is all part of the same movement to silence and erase diverse literature. Or I mean, I would just all books, you know, really.
Yeah.
If one book is threatened, they're all threatened.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. And so your book comes out on Tuesday, is that right?
My book comes out on
one more
Tuesday.
time.
Yes, it's called The Blood Years.
Another beautiful.
You can pre-order it wherever you like to get books. There's also an audio version. I'm very excited to hear it myself. I've got to help choose the reader, and she's fantastic. So yes, please, I hope you'll order yourself and several other copies for those who love great Hanukkah or Christmas present, The Blood Years.
Beautiful.
I pre-ordered it, so I will be you next week. So I'm very excited. Thank you for your work. Thank you for joining us. Everybody, thank you for watching. I'll save this conversation so it can be rewatched, and we just appreciate everybody. We all have a voice, and let's use them.
Thank you,
so
everyone, for coming.
Thank
I really
you. Have a great
appreciate it, too.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.